Today, I'm going to tear this entire toilet down piece by piece all the way to the floor. And then I'm going to put it back together again. The toilet that I'm working with today is a Kohler Highline curve. Now, this is actually one of the most popular toilets in America, but if the toilet you're working on is not the same exact one, don't worry. The parts are pretty much the same for any standard toilet. Plus, I will be showing you parts to other toilets throughout the video. The first thing I'll do is turn the water to the toilet off, and then I'll flush the toilet until it stops flushing. Basically, just hold the handle down until it stops making noise. You want to get as much of the water out of the back as possible. Once you've removed as much of the water out of the back as you can, get the rest of the water with a wet vacuum. You can mop it up with towels. You can even siphon the water out with a tube. The first thing I'll be removing is the fill valve. The fill valve is what fills the back of the tank with water after you flush the toilet. It has a float on it. When the water level rises, this float rises, and when it gets to the top, it turns the water off. First, get a towel that you don't mind getting dirty. Next, we have to take this supply line off, ensuring that you have in fact turned the water off at this point. That's a very crucial step. Turn the water off. Anytime you remove this supply line, go ahead and replace it with a brand new one. To remove the fill valve, there's a nut right here on the bottom of the tank. It's usually either a white or gray nut. Sometimes they're black. You have to remove that. Remove this black tube from the flush valve, and then your fill valve should pull straight up and out. The next thing I'll remove off this toilet is the handle. There's one key thing about the handle that is not normal. This nut on the back is actually reverse threaded. So lefty loosey, righty tighty does not apply to a toilet handle. It's actually righty loosey, lefty tighty. Disconnect the flapper chain from the handle and it will pull right out. The next thing I'll do is remove the tank from the actual bowl of the toilet. And to do that, there's 3 tank to bowl bolts on this toilet. One here, here, and here. Some toilets only have 2 tank to bowl bolts. If you look on the bottom of those tank to bowl bolts that I showed you earlier, you'll find the nut that holds them. You need to remove all 3 of those nuts, or there's only 2 if you only have 2 tank to bowl bolts. This tool right here is fantastic. It usually comes with a brand new toilet. They put it in the box. If you ever get one, hold on to it because it makes it very easy to remove these nuts. Now that you've removed those nuts, put your towel right there on your toilet seat. In this tank, pull it straight up and it should come right out. Now that I pulled the tank off, you can see here, these are the tank to bowl bolts, but we also have your tank to bowl gasket. To remove this gasket, I have to push the bolts up. I'll pull them out through the other side of the tank. Most of the time, they're not stuck in there so tight. On most toilets, they're not even tied in with this gasket here. I'll show you some other ones so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, this tank to bowl gasket is also tied in with the flush valve. So I actually have to remove the flush valve here in order to remove this tank to bowl gasket. I have another one of these really cool tools that comes with most universal repair kits that you can buy. So I'll just loosen this up and I should be able to unscrew it with my fingers here. I'll pull this flush valve straight and out. This is a canister flush valve. It's not your typical flush valve that you're used to seeing. However, it is still pretty common. Now I can pull this tank to bowl gasket out. And this is the tank to bowl gasket for the toilet that I'm working on. Let's talk about the different types of flush valves that you may see. This here is your standard 2-inch flush valve. It has a 2-inch flapper on it. This is probably a lot more common. You know it's a 2-inch because the bottom of the flush valve is approximately 2 inches. If you're completely taking the toilet apart, you might as well just take the parts to the hardware store. But you don't have to take the toilet apart to know what size flush valve you have and what size flapper you have. Since this is a 2-inch flush valve, it has a 2-inch flapper. I'll even throw a tape on here. This can be a little misleading because this 2-inch flapper, the top of it is actually 3 inches. A little confusing. To install this, you would remove this nut right here on the bottom. Take this piece of paper off. Very important. You want to remove this piece of paper and this piece of paper before you install the thing, or you're going to have leaks. So you would put this down through that hole. You want to orient this thing so that whenever you install your chain onto your toilet handle, it's going to work properly. So imagine this. If your toilet handle's over here and you orient this like this, it's not going to pull it up. You would almost have to orient this like so it's very easy for the toilet handle to pull it up. Put this in there, test it out before you complete the install, because you don't want to have to take it all apart again. This one is a 3-inch flush valve. You know it's a 3-inch because the bottom of the flush valve is 3 inches. This 3-inch flapper is actually closer to 4 inches. Another thing you can do, it's super easy. Just pop the flapper off. If you're only having flapper issues, take the flapper to the hardware store. That's the easiest thing to do. The only downside to that is your toilet's not going to be working while you have these pieces taken apart. So I'll just go ahead and pop this on here real quick so that you can see how it goes together. Keep in mind, just go ahead and remove this. First thing you should be doing, remove these pieces of paper. I'll insert the flush valve down through the top. I'm going to hold it, tighten it with this wrench. The new flush valve should come with a wrench. Tighten it, not super tight, just real snug. It comes with a 2-inch tank to bowl gasket. This just goes right on there. You just shove it on there. On this particular one, it's not built in with the tank to bowl bolts like the previous. The next thing here is going to be my toilet handle. Keep in mind, this is reverse threaded. So lefty tighty, righty loosey. The next thing we'll do here is attach the flapper chain. Now this is much easier to do if I have the tank upright, but I'm going to do it like this so you can see. You don't want there to be a lot of slack in this chain, but you don't want it to be too tight either. See, there's not a ton of slack in this thing. There's a little bit, but there's not a lot. Flappers are notorious for the chain coming off. The chain might even get hung up on stuff. This piece right here, you can see there's a gap in the chain. You can take a pair of needle nose pliers and you can crush this to close any gaps that there might be. These are notorious for popping off just randomly. One last thing I'll show you with these flush valves. What I normally do is I just adjust it to the water level of the tank. This is going to be your overflow level. So the water will not get any higher than the height of this tube right here. So I just put this tube a little bit higher than the water stains in your tank. The main thing is you definitely don't want it any higher than the tank itself, and try not to make it any higher than the height of this hole where your handle goes. Now let's talk tank to bowl bolts. What you would do here to install these, take the bolt, shove this rubber washer on there, and this goes down from the top through to the bottom. First of all, you put all 3 in there, and you would take it and drop it through the holes. Now, I'm going to demonstrate just like this. You would take that metal washer and that nut, thread it, and tighten it. I want to be clear with something here. Sometimes these kits come with extra washers and nuts. Here's what you don't want to do. This looks normal, but do not do what I'm doing right now. Do not put your stainless steel washer above your rubber washer. It seems like that's how it should be, but it's not. It will leak. This rubber washer goes directly to the bolt head with nothing between it. Look in the description. Get my free plumbing inspection guide. Very important, right? You can catch issues before they become a major problem that can cost you really tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage, especially if you have beautiful hardwood floors. I mean, water destroys them like that. Next, I'll remove the toilet seat. Very easy. Most of the time, these 2 covers right here, they just pop right up. And you remove these 2 bolts right here. Typically, a large flathead or a large Phillips will do the job. Here's one thing that I want to hit on real quick. A lot of people don't know this. This is actually an easy clean toilet seat. These are not just covers to cover the bolts. They actually lock this thing in. Notice, once I lift these, I can actually take the toilet seat and pop it right off. Clean up in here with your scrub brush, and this is what it looks like And that is how you remove a toilet seat. Now you can see we're basically just down to the porcelain that you sit on. Whenever you hear people say they reset the toilet, that is essentially what we are about to do. So the next step will be to lift it off of the toilet flange. Take a blade and you want to score the caulk around the bottom of the toilet. Your toilet should be caulked to the floor. I'll be honest, they're not always caulked to the floor. If you don't do this and you go trying to pull the toilet up, you may pull your flooring up, especially if you have linoleum flooring. You know, it's just like it's sort of like, I mean, it's sort of like wallpaper except for your floor. I guess you could call it floor paper. It's not paper, but that's essentially what it is. They just roll it out and glue it down. But if you do not score that caulk, you go pulling it up, you might rip it. Next, pop these caps off. Take your crescent wrench, loosen these. These are called flange bolts. Those are exactly what is holding your toilet to the floor. I almost forgot. Liquid lock. This stuff is awesome. Instead of taking a shop vac and vacuuming all that water out, just get you some liquid lock. You pour this in there and it solidifies that water. It's sort of in like a gel so that you can pull the toilet and not make a mess. Just follow the instructions on the back, but essentially all you do is you dump the whole entire packet in there. For most of your modern toilets, one pack is enough. If you have one of those really old toilets that holds a lot of water, you might want to use two. Let that sit for about 5 minutes and then we'll pull it. While you wait for that water to solidify, get you a trash bag, put it off to the side. You'll be putting the toilet bowl on top of this. There's going to be wax on the bottom of this bowl. You don't want to be putting that wax on your floor. Now you can see that liquid lock is nice and gelled up. We should not have any issues. Next step is to lift this off of the flange and put it on our trash bag. The easiest way to do it, just squat down right over it and lift straight up. Sort of duck walk it over to your trash bag. Take your scraper, go ahead and clean this mess up. This is why you don't use silicone. You use normal caulk. First of all, silicone can stain the floor. Second of all, it is a pain to get up. So if we were going in here with a completely different toilet, the footprint is not always the same. It is very hard to get all of this silicone completely up. If it was normal caulk, you can almost pull it up all in one piece sometimes. We'll go ahead and pull this wax ring up and off as well. That is your wax ring. This is what makes a watertight seal between the flange and the bowl. Clean up all this silicone. It's a freaking mess. Now, the very last thing to do is remove the flange bolts. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. These ones were easy, and I like that. All right, and that's it. You watched me completely tear down an entire toilet. Next up, we're going to put it all back together again. The first thing to do is install your flange bolts. I'm using Johnny Quick bolt today. Get solid brass bolts. I like these ones because they're nice and thick. They're solid. They're not going to rust out. But they also have these plastic keepers on them to hold them in place during the install. Go ahead and slide that plastic keeper on there. Bring it down to about a quarter to a half inch. So you take these, you slide them into your flange. You want these bolts to be completely parallel to the wall. The flange that I'm working with here is flush with the floor, so the 2 1/4 bolts work just fine. If you have a flange that is a lot deeper, you might need to get the 3 1/2 inch bolts. They're a lot longer. Remember, you can always cut the bolts later, but you can't ever add threads to them. Next up, a standard Johnny ring. Again, my flange is not deep, so I only need one. If you have a very deep flange, you might need to put 2 wax rings on here. One other quick tip, if this wax ring is very cold because it's been sitting in your car and it's winter time, fill up a sink with the hottest water that you can get through that tap. And while it's still in this plastic, just throw it in there like this, let it float. Let it warm up a little bit. You don't want it so hot that it's beginning to melt, but you don't want this thing to be frozen solid because then it might crack during the install. A cracked wax ring is a bad wax ring. For the next step, we'll take the toilet bowl and set it perfectly on top of our wax and our toilet flange bolts. The easiest way to pick this up, straddle it, put your hands under here. Sometimes you can even grab right here, pick it up, and sort of duck walk it over to your flange. I put the front of the toilet on the floor, and I'm looking through these holes here, lining up the bolts, and just letting it set down ever so easily. Straighten the toilet as best you can. Typically, it's a lot easier to make sure it's perfectly straight when you actually have the tank on it. So what I'll do now, I'll push down on it to make sure that wax ring is completely squished and the base of the toilet is all the way on the floor. After you get your toilet set and as straight as you can get it, you want to make sure there's no wobble in the toilet. Put both of your hands on opposite sides of the toilet throughout different directions and wobble back and forth. If you feel wobble, you need to correct it now. I use a toilet shim. Specifically, I use the soft ones. I like the soft ones because they're easier to shove in there, but more important, they're easier to cut. So if you have wobble in your toilet, you need to pinpoint that and shove your shim in there to eliminate it. Now imagine I have wobble. Whenever I push down right here, the toilet tilts that way. I'll take my shim, I'll shove it in there as far as I can. You might even need to add shims around different areas of the base of the toilet. After I get my toilet completely set, there's no wobble. I take my blade, I put it against the porcelain, and I cut that shim. That way, you can't see it. Once the toilet is set exactly where it's going to be, you want to put your washers and nuts on the flange bolts. Now these caps right here, they come with a plastic white washer, and that goes on first. I don't have any for this toilet. I don't know where they are, but I don't have them. It'll be all right. So you would put that white washer on there first. There it is, my imaginary one. Next up is my metal flat washer. And finally, my nut. And only finger tight. Not even finger tight. Just put them on there because you may have to shift it just a little bit to get it perfectly straight. Same for the other side. Cool. Next, I'm going to install all of my hardware back onto the toilet. I'll start out with my flush valve. Put it in there from the top. Now remember, this specific one, the tank to bowl gasket is built into the threads of the flush valve. So I need to put that on before I put this nut on here. Before you tighten this nut, double check the orientation of the chain on the flush valve. Make sure it's going to work with your toilet handle. In fact, I'll go ahead and put my toilet handle on so I know that we don't have any issues. Keeping in mind, this toilet handle nut is reverse threaded. Reverse thread means lefty tighty, righty loosey. Just finger tight that toilet handle nut. It's only plastic. If you put a wrench on it, you will break it. Now that I have my handle in here, I'll go ahead and hook up the chain, making sure there's not a ton of slack. That's actually more slack than I like to see, so I'm going to fix that. Perfect. If you have a tight chain, you risk the flapper not sealing like it's supposed to. Just a little bit of slack. Perfect. Now that I have my flush valve in, I'm going to insert my tank to bowl bolts. I'll go ahead and push those all the way through. Do not forget to tighten your flush valve. You don't want this to be super tight, just tight enough. The last piece to install on the tank is the fill valve. So I'll take the fill valve, drop it in from the top, and then secure this nut on the bottom. Do not over tighten this nut. Just get it on there finger tight, put a wrench on there, give it a quarter turn, and that's it. If you over tighten a plastic nut, it will split and you will flood your bathroom. Now that I have all of the pieces installed on my toilet tank, I'll go ahead and drop it right there on top. Finally, to secure the toilet tank to the bowl, I'll put my nuts and washers on. Start off by threading all of them on. Just thread them far enough so they won't fall off, and then you'll start hand tightening all of them, trying to keep them relatively equal throughout that process. You will be putting your tool on them to get them much tighter. What I like to do as I tighten, I'll push that side of the tank down because this is only a plastic tool, right? It will start to strip here over time. To get as much life as I can out of these things, I push the tank down as I tighten that side. And I try to keep them relatively even. I don't tighten one all the way and then move to the others. Now, how tight should these be? You want them tight enough that it will smash this rubber tank to bowl gasket. You want it to squeeze that gasket to make it a watertight connection. Now that I've tightened all three bolts, I'm going to look at the toilet from the viewpoint of the camera and make sure that this thing is nice and level relative to the bowl itself. I also want to make sure that the toilet tank and bowl are straight as can be. Once I have it perfectly straight where I want it to be, I'll go ahead and tighten these flange bolt nuts here to really lock it in. You don't want to over tighten them to the point where you either break the flange or crack the porcelain here. but you want it tight enough so that there's no wobble in the toilet and it will not easily shift left and right. Once you get those nuts tight, go ahead and pop your caps on there and you should be good to go at the bottom. We're going to connect the supply line and then we can turn this thing on. Anytime you remove an existing supply line, go ahead and replace it with a brand new one. Connect the other end of the supply line to your fill valve. And if you've done everything right so far, you can turn this water on and you should have 0 leaks. Once the water fills the tank all the way, make sure all of your water levels are where they need to be. First of all, you want to make sure that this fill valve is turning off all the way. If it's not off, you'll know it. You will hear the water running. Second of all, you want to make sure that the water is not overflowing into this flush valve here. If you're having either one of those issues, you'll have to either adjust the flush valve or adjust the fill valve until you get it completely dialed in. Now that we have this dialed in, let's give it some test flushes and see what happens. Give it a few hard flushes. By hard flush, I mean push this handle down and hold it until it has no more water to flush. Well, I've checked for leaks so far. I have not found any. Now I'll install the seat. Check the base of the toilet. Make sure there's no water creeping out around the base of the toilet. The last thing to do is seal the base of the toilet with caulk. This is the one that I'm using today. It's 100% waterproof. It says it's strong as silicone. It's also shrink and crack proof. In addition to that, it's clear. I like to use clear. If you use white, it shows every single little wave that you leave in the caulk. I like to use clear when I can because it doesn't show blemishes nearly as well. Just take the gun, go as far back as you can, and run a bead all the way around the base. I want to explain why it's so important to caulk the base of your toilet. Not only does the caulk help to set this toilet in, kind of glue it to the floor, it also helps with any minimal wobble that you may have. The most important reason to caulk your toilet to the floor. Imagine this is the base of your toilet. If urine hits the side and goes down, at the very bottom, it's going to wick underneath the toilet base. I mean, it's nasty. I see it all the time. You will have urine sitting underneath this toilet. It stinks. It stains. You know, it's just not good. So when you caulk the base of the toilet, urine hits the front of the toilet, runs down, and it hits the floor. You clean it up later. Get my home inspection guide. I recommend that you inspect your plumbing once a month. You do this and you can dramatically limit the possibility of causing major damage in your home. You can get ahead of issues before they become major problems. Thanks for making it this far in the video. You watched me completely tear down this toilet and then put it all back together again. If you have any questions regarding your toilet or anything I did here today, drop it in the comments. I try to answer your questions within 24 hours.